Hey guys, my name is Shai, and I'm going to dive right in to the topic of suicide, okay? And this is the spiritual perspective. This is not intended to be a mental health video or a self-help video or any of that. This is the spiritual perspective of, well, I mean, it's my perspective, right? This is my interpretation, my opinion, based on my own, my own spiritual journey, right? Because one of the things I have been understanding about myself, and I've been led on some rather deep initiations on this over the past few years, it's that one of the reasons I am here on Earth, and even in this universe itself, is that I work with souls who have taken their own lives in other lives, right? That is one of my reasons for being here. It is one of my soul missions, and really it is the biggest reason I'm here. Of course, I do many things. I have many projects, many soul missions, if you want to call them that, but I have a very strong memory of feeling like outside of this universe, right? Being in my home outside of this universe and feeling the pull, like this universe inviting me to come into it, to incarnate, to take on soul experiences inside this universe. And I was like, nah, why would I bother doing that, right? Why? I have everything I want right here. But then I realized, I could go into this universe and I could be one of the very many beings, I'm just one of many, one of a very large group. I could be one of those beings who helps souls that have gotten stuck, right? And I feel like it's a little bit dramatic to say, saving lost souls, because that's overly dramatic, right? And I think one of the things that happens when we all receive channeled information, either we channel it ourselves or we're getting the channeled information from somebody else, things that are simply true, once we interpret them with human language in English, in our human minds, they start to sound overly dramatic, when really it's just, it doesn't have to be as dramatic as it sounds, right? So I don't really think of it as like saving lost souls. I am just here to be one more helping hand to help souls who are stuck get themselves unstuck, right? And that's how I think of souls who have committed suicide, because I really want to emphasize here that I know, like, we say suicide, and now there's so many different interpretations, so many different understandings about what happens to a soul after it commits suicide, and most of them are pretty gnarly, right? I take a very neutral view on this. I essentially understand that every time we leave our bodies, right, it's all kind of the same, right? Leaving your body is leaving your body, but what makes the difference, right? Or what can be different about leaving your body? It's essentially the state of consciousness that you are in when you exit your body. And that has an effect on what happens to you as you are leaving your body, right? Kind of where you go after you leave your body, and what happens to you next time you incarnate, right? So I don't really see suicide as really that much different than any other type of traumatic death experience, right? It's just one more type of a traumatic death experience. For example, my most recent death that I can remember, right? I died filled with rage, right? I was just so angry that I actually manifested a liver disease and died like within 3 days from acute liver failure. As you know, rage and anger lives in your liver, so it kind of makes a lot of sense. And so that wasn't a particularly good way for me to go out, right? Because I was filled with rage, and I was in like a rage state when I died. I literally left my body like screaming in anger, right? In rage, like all-consuming rage. But once I left my body, I went off and everything was great. So it didn't affect me after I left my body, but when I got back into this body, in this life, I've had to deal with anger issues, right? And I spent a good 15 years releasing that, right? Because when I came back into my body, I had to deal with all the rage, because I had essentially left the frequency of rage down here. And then when I came back down here, I had to deal with that, right? So basically, I think the same thing happens when somebody commits suicide. And you got to think and this is the thing where you have to understand there are different types of suicides, right? You can, some people can commit suicide and have zero ill effects from this. You can actually have suicides by soul contract, and it can actually be done. Maybe you can use your imagination and imagine some kind of strange scenario where you could commit suicide in a positive frame of mind. And I'm not saying to do this, right? Please don't do this, because really the point here is that suicide doesn't solve your problem, and it's never really a good way to go. But you can imagine some kind of scenario where maybe a soul took on a soul contract to end their life by suicide, and in that case, the soul would not normally experience ill effects because they would probably be a rather advanced soul who was prepared for this, right? So not all suicides have ill effects to begin with. So what kind of state of consciousness are most people in when they commit suicide, right? What state of consciousness are most people in when they commit suicide? It's typically some kind of place of despair, right? This is like the blackest despair. It is a giving up. It is a wanting everything to stop. It is a feeling of, I don't want to be here. I'm not good to anybody. They would be better off without me. Those type of thoughts. So what happens when you leave your body in that state of consciousness and then come back in? Honestly, in my experience, most souls, even if they leave their body in that state of consciousness, they still go off to a good place, right? It's not like heaven or hell. Like if you know me, right, I don't believe in like the Christian idea of heaven and hell, but I do understand, from all of my experiences, that your state of consciousness, your vibration, your frequency will create the type of afterlife experience that you have, right? And so it's actually your own creation, right? It's your own creation, what kind of place you go. But you got to remember that, just think about people who have NDEs, right? Even people who have negative NDEs, which are a very small percentage of NDEs, they have, so many guides and helpers and soul family waiting for them that even if they have a negative experience, they are helped up out of that so that they can go on and have a positive experience. So I think the vast majority of the time, the soul ends up having a positive experience in the afterlife. And I don't think this is something we should be worrying about too much, right? The trouble comes when you come back into your body, and now you find yourself, okay, you're trying to live a new life, you're back down here, you're doing your life all over again, or a new life all over again. But you have this lingering frequency of despair, of giving up. And this is when it's like, don't bother committing suicide from a place of despair, because it's not going to solve your problem. You're just going to be right back in it, right? And this is where souls get stuck, right? They get stuck in, because now they have practiced despair, and they've emphasized despair, and they've emphasized giving up, and they've emphasized and practiced all of these, this state of consciousness, this vibration that nobody wants to be in. So they kind of get stuck in it. It's not that they're trapped in it or that anything like that. It's, I don't know, when you're playing a video game and you just like can't figure out the puzzle and you just feel stuck and you're like, and it gets really frustrating and annoying. Or maybe it's a crossword puzzle. You just can't figure out that one word, right? Eventually you can figure it out, right? And eventually maybe you get some help and you figure it out, but eventually you can get unstuck. So really it's just this, it's this stuckness, right? There's other reasons you can be stuck, right? You can be stuck from having had a traumatic, torture and murder, death experience, right? This is why I say, in my mind, suicide is just another way of creating traumatic experiences for yourself and kind of getting yourself stuck in a low vibrational frequency. But of course, just like anything else, you do eventually break out of it, and there's a whole host of high frequency beings in this universe just pouring as much help and support as you are willing to accept, right? And I don't mean like you, right? I don't think most of you watching this, there's inevitably going to be a few of you watching this who might identify yourself as having been a suicide in a previous life. And I would say only take that identity into your mind if it like really clicks. If you're like, wow, that is the missing piece of the puzzle. That is the thing I needed to know. That is the thing that makes everything make sense, right? Because it's not, even though, I have this thing where I know I'm here to, work with suicides, it's not like all of my viewers or clients are suicides, right? Not by a long shot. It's just this thing that is emphasized in my soul experience, right? So I think I've lost my train of thought a little bit. Let me get a water. It's hot in the sun. My basic point here is that none of this has to be as scary or as dramatic as it might sound, right? It just doesn't. So, how do I personally assist souls who have committed suicide? There's lots of different ways, lots of different beings do this in different ways. There's lots of different strategies. Different souls will, of course, need different techniques, right? The way I do it is just through patient presence, right? Patient presence. And this has taken me, this is actually part of my learning, right? Because it's not like I am here to help these people. It's actually what do I learn? How do I learn from this service, right? At the end of the day, anything we do to help and serve others really ends up being what is like, what are we getting out of it, right? How does it help us? How does it help us? How do we learn from this? What do I learn from this? So I learn a lot about doing less, about being hands off, and really about understanding that you can't really help anyone, right? We're, of course, so many beings in the universe are offering so much help, so much support, so much guidance, but at the end of the day, nobody can really help anyone because everyone has free will and everyone has to do the motions themselves, right? Everyone has to go through the motions themselves. You can't move someone. You can't turn someone into a puppet, right? And turning someone into a puppet doesn't help them. So that's why my method is just patient presence. And that is part of my soul learning because I'm here to learn patience, because I think of myself as the most impatient person ever, and yet I am on this incredibly long process of learning infinite patience and to just be present in a patient, peaceful state. And that's it. That's it. Again, there are other ways, but that is the way that I practice at this time. And all of this is my understanding at this time, and that's all you should take this as. I could go deeper into this, but I think I'm just going to leave it there. It's a nice sunny day. It's very warm and hot. Did I mention it's August 8th on Lionsgate? For some reason, I was called to record this today of all days, so the sunlight is very special today. Go get some sunlight. It'll be good for you. Sending everyone so much love and light. I'll talk to you later. Bye.